What a Strange Little Colt. Written by Linwood. Chapter 9. Leaps and Bounds, Part 2.
Well, let's get going then.
A grunt came from the front of the cart, and it acquiesced with a groan, beginning to roll its way down the road. "Wow," said a sarcastic voice. "It's not stuck anymore. How very strange." Sweetie Belle snickered to herself, then followed her friends up to trot along beside Gabriel, leaving Applejack to trail along behind, much to Apple Bloom's annoyance. After the property damage incident last time, she had promised to bring along adult supervision, because it had been the only way to wiggle out of a grounding of epic proportions. Sweetie Belle gave Gabriel a sidelong glance as the party left the farm. After he and Diamond returned to school, things had been more than a little awkward. But lo and behold, the incident seemed to have knocked some sense into that green head of his. Gabe didn't ask or answer as many questions as possible in class, and he actually came out to recess with them, telling them about what had happened. Even better, he had helped them all with their math, which was great because he was an honest-to-Celestia genius at it. Of course, things had been tense. Most of the other fools gave him a wide berth and whispered to each other when they thought he wasn't looking, even though it didn't seem to bother him. Once Sweetie convinced Scootaloo and Apple Bloom to give him another chance, he seemed, well, not ecstatic, but happier, as far as she could tell. Being around him had been scary at first. Sweetie kept remembering the face he had made after he got hit, but it turned out he was actually pretty friendly when he wanted to be. It wasn't so hard to think of a pony who had broken Diamond's legs without a second hesitation, and the Colt who made toilet jokes because he knew they got on Miss Cheerle's nerves as two entirely different beings. And that was enough for her. "I still think we should have made him pull us," Scootaloo murmured in Sweetie's ear. Despite Gabe actually trying to be their friend, Scootaloo still hadn't come around. The Colt muttered as he pulled. "Being tiny fucking sucks." Sweetie huffed and muttered her response. "Scoots, we're walking to the other side of town. Let's stop being funny and start being mean before we pass your cube corner." "Whatever." Scootaloo looked ahead when she saw Applejack appear on Gabriel's other side.
Howdy, Gabe,
she said. "Howdy," he grunted back.
You sure you don't want any help pulling that thing?
She made a little smile.
I saw those fillies piled on quite a bit of cargo.
"Nope," he replied, giving her a strained grin. "Got it. Thanks." Applejack hummed, but didn't say anything more about it.
"So, Gabe,"
she said.
"It's good to see you out of all those bandages."
"Yep, now we get to show off this gnarly scar." Sweetie didn't know exactly what gnarly meant, but she could sure as heck guess. The first day he had to come to school bandage-less, the fillies, and much of the rest of the class, had all stared the moment he looked away. The furless knot of previously sutured tissue running down the length of his side was pretty darn nasty to look at, and Apple Bloom had only managed it for a few seconds. From then on, Bloom made sure to carefully avert her eyes whenever his side was facing her. Applejack only laughed, though not bothered at all by the sight.
"Well, enjoy the surprise looks while you can. Once your coat regrows, it'll look good as new."
Sweetie Belle doubted that. "Only if I decide not to shave it off. Gotta let everybody know how bad this pony is," Gabe said, throwing a little strut into his step. Apple Bloom groaned, looking a little green around the gills, and Sweetie couldn't help but to giggle. The five walked across town, passing through markets and into the park, which had been chosen as a crusading location because it offered plentiful free space for activities, and not a lot of possible casualties. By the time they reached the tree, shaped like a three-armed slingshot, Gabe was sweating and panting. Applejack unharnessed him with a raised eyebrow.
"That was some real hollering, Sugar Cube,"
she said with a bit of a smile. "Ain't nothing I haven't managed before." The way he flopped into the grass implied that his statement may not have been entirely truthful. AJ raised an eyebrow.
"Well, if you're ever looking for a few extra bits, Sweet Apple Acres would be happy to put those skills to good use."
"Wow, I'll keep that in mind." It sounded like he wouldn't. Applejack's smile vanished.
Just so you know, most folks around here don't take kindly to a smart aleck.
He didn't respond. While Applejack retrieved the daily paper from her saddlebags and made herself comfortable next to Gabe, the fillies began to drag their construction materials out of the cart. An excited Scootaloo unrolled her blueprints from a device that would carry them through the next crusade, and they all gathered around to admire their brilliant plan.
Cutie Mark Crusaders long-range projectile marks ponies, yay!
Applejack shot them a suspicious look.
I better not be seeing any fillies get launched, Bloom. Don't worry, sis, I better not be seeing any Colts get launched neither.
We're not launching ourselves, Applejack.
Scootaloo said, backing up her frustrated friend.
We're just launching rocks and stuff into the old field.
Applejack opened her mouth.
And no ponies over there.
She closed it again. The skeptical mare returned her attention to the agricultural section and the foals got busy. Scootaloo shimmied up the tree and looped the rope around one of the branches, pulling it down to ground level and tying it down. Apple Bloom and Sweetie were up next, constructing a cup at the end of their impromptu swing.
Oh, dude,
giggled the Pegasus filly as she dragged a hoof through her purple mane.
This is going to be awesome.
That was about the time when Gabriel decided that he wasn't that tired.
Not as awesome as it could be,
he said from his spot on the grass with a downright villainous twinkle in his eye.
What you all need is a counterweight.
The fillies all squinted and tilted their heads.
What now?
A counterweight,
the little green foal repeated, getting up off the grass.
It's just physics. If we add some leverage and put a weight on the other end, it's gonna throw stuff way further. And I mean way further.
Apple Bloom smiled right alongside Sooty Belle.
That sounds terrific. Let's do it.
Wait, hold on.
An annoyed-looking Scootaloo turned to the other fillies.
Girls, we designed this together. Come on. I don't know, Scoots. Gabe seems to know what he's talking about. But...
Scoot's face got a little redder.
But it was my idea. He's just trying to give us a huff.
Sweetie said, trying to be helpful and regretting it the moment Scootaloo whirled around to face her.
Shut up. He isn't trying to help us. He's trying to make it his.
She hissed in her face. Sweetie Belle might have said something, and she would have regretted it if Gabe hadn't stepped in.
Scootaloo?
The filly whirled around to face him.
What?
He didn't flinch.
I wasn't trying to cause an issue. What's going on? Something wrong? What's wrong is that you're trying to steal the show.
His eyebrows drew together and his muzzle scrunched.
I was trying to help. Yeah, well, the girls and I designed the tree catapult. You can't just come up and...
She snorted, stomping in a little circle. Her eyes looked wet.
And come in and replace us.
The way she sounded, it made it sound more like replace me. The Colt bit his lip and looked Scootaloo in the eye for a long moment before speaking.
I'm sorry then. I'm not trying to replace any pony. If that's what's important to you, we can do it your way. I don't mind.
Scootaloo blinked.
Really?
She said, somewhere between hesitant and suspicious.
Yeah, it clearly means way more to you than it does to me. And I wouldn't be much of a crusader if I knew that and still gonna fight with you over it, would I?
He got an owlish stare in response. After a second, the Pegasus filly sniffed and dragged a foreleg across her eyes.
Thanks,
she managed.
That's really cool of you. Don't mention it.
He gave her a big, honest smile and held up a hoof. She looked at it for a second, then returned it with a bump and a little smile of her own.
And hey, Scoots,
he said.
I wouldn't worry too much about taking Rainbow away from you. I'm only supposed to stay with her for a few weeks.
Sweetie Belle's eyes shot open.
He's known the whole time?
The Pegasus filly nearly choked on her own tongue.
What?
She chuckled awkwardly.
I don't know why. Oh, come on. I'm not blind.
Gabe said with a good-natured grin.
There's only one reason you'd be jealous of me, and it's not because I'm good at math.
Sweetie Belle caught a bit of movement from the corner of her eye and turned her head to see Applejack standing a little ways away with a satisfied smile on her face. She nodded at Sweetie and turned around, trotting back over to her newspaper.
Oh, wow.
Sweetie Belle thought.
It's a good thing Applejack didn't have to get involved. That could have been too awkward to handle.
Scootaloo opened her mouth, closed it again, then looked back at the tree, then at the plants, then at Apple Bloom and Sweetie, then looked back to Gabrielle.
Well, I guess we can use a counter thingy, if it's really gonna make it that much more awesome.
Gabe's smile became a great deal more mischievous.
That's the spirit.
Twilight. The stallion's voice came drifting over the next hill. I think I found something. Twilight straightened her neck, bringing her head up to look around for a moment. Not that she could see all that much. She had been investigating a patch of muddy ground in the ditch between two of the field's rolling hills. She had been sure the whisper of remnant magic had come from somewhere over here, and judging by the excitement in Looking Glass's voice, she had been right.
I'm coming. 1 second.
Her hoofs complained as she worked her way up the hill. The grass here grew unmaintained and unchecked, and its rough, scratchy tips reached up to the fur on Twilight's belly. Needless to say, the midday heat and hours of searching had left her feeling very itchy and hot.
I'm going to be brushing out birds for an hour tonight.
She thought to herself with a groan, glancing up to the cloudless blue sky. Here! Over here! The black and white stallion danced on his hoof tips in excitement when he saw Twilight crest the hill. Take a look at this! He pointed his hoof at the spot he had been skirting, and Twilight trotted into the gently sloped saddle-shaped divot in the hill. The not yet yellow grass obscured her view until the moment she was upon it, so much that she nearly stepped in a spot of cracked reddish earth.
What?
Twilight stopped, inspecting the spot, then at what Looking was so focused on. It wasn't much more than a disturbance in the grass. A circle no wider than 2 ponies end to end had been flattened some time ago. In the center, more grass had been crushed, and something had discolored the stalks here, creating a strange scratchwork of brown and green. The earth below it had been seemingly discolored in strange spots, making a nonsense outline.
What is it, Looking?
Twilight said, tilting her head. Don't you recognize it? Looking crouched down in the way that reminded Twilight of opalescence. It's dried blood, and it's been here for a while.
Blood?
Twilight's heart seized and she took a step back, a little unnerved. Now it made sense. Something had collapsed here and crushed the grass, and it had been injured.
Hold on,
she said, trying to keep her voice steady and professional.
I'll do a scan.
She closed her eyes and lowered her head, reaching out and searching for the telltale unbalanced whisper of an aura that signified soul magic. At this point, she performed the spell so many times she didn't have to focus particularly hard to weave it, and each and every time, it had returned exactly 0 response. So Twilight nearly jumped out of her hooves when it went ping.
Oh!
What? What did you find? Looking raised his head, his eyes wide.
It was here.
Twilight said, not quite believing herself.
It's a soul magic aura, just like you said. Weak and nearly faded, but here.
Then she furrowed her brow and walked around the site, positioning herself up to next to the bloody spot and looking out into the world. In the distance, Canterlot's magnificent spires and extravagant buildings gleamed.
Whenever the spell created,
she said,
it landed here.
Oh. Looking's voice caught Twilight's attention. Twilight, look at this. He held, in his magic, a small, crusty lump of grass.
No.
Twilight corrected herself upon closer inspection.
A feather.
It had been soaked in blood and had long since dried, leaving its bristles crusted and bent, and nearly coloring the whole thing a dull, muddy brown, save for one spot at the very tip. There, the feather's original forest green color still shone true. Gabe's addition to the weaponized tree required them to add a good deal of wood along the length of the bent branch. The resulting extension stuck out into the air the opposite of the cup, pointing out into the sky. Sweetie Belle had watched as the others hung a basket from the end with a length of rope and began to stack old bricks in it. Scootaloo got pretty excited when she had to nail in the spike, keeping the branch bent over even harder.
Now we're talking.
Scoot had muttered to herself as she stomped the stake into the ground. They'd stopped once the wood began to groan angrily, and now they stood together near the cup at the end of the branch. She watched as Gabe passed a hefty hoof-sized rock to Scootaloo.
"Honor's all yours, Scoots,"
he said. She eagerly, but gently, loaded the Catapult, giggling all the while. The four walked back to what Gabe said was a probably safe distance, don't worry about it, and Scootaloo picked up her lengthy poking stick. Sweetie Belle's ears twitched as he heard Applejack trot up behind them and stare at the growing, bent-over tree.
Hey now, before ya...
No, wait, hold on. Watch this.
Scootaloo held out the stick and ever so gently nudged the stake with its tip. The tree, now with the freedom to do so, expressed its displeasure with lightning speed and the mightiest thwop Sweetie had ever had the pleasure of hearing with her own 2 ears. The onlookers were treated to a blast of leaf-strewn wind, and a lesson on why they had kept their distance. The stake whipped around off the rope fast enough to embed itself into the tree's trunk. Meanwhile, the little rock transformed into a blur via sheer force and rocketed out over the park, over the field, past the park, and into the everfree forest. Scootaloo whooped and hollered and jumped in the air. Bloom widened her eyes and rubbed her head. Applejack got a heavily concerned look on her face, and Gabe pumped his hoof in a way that was definitely not cute and muttered,
"Ah, fuck yeah,"
which Sweetie guessed she wasn't supposed to hear. Then he looked right at her. The little unicorn's eyebrows shut up, and she tore her eyes from this as fast as she could, cursing her white coat and praying that her blush would go away before Scootaloo noticed. Of course, because the universe hated her, Scootaloo did look back, but a voice interrupted the snarky remark that Sweetie Belle could see forming behind those devious purple eyes.
"Hey, kids, did you just see an... is that what I think it is?"
Looking Glass and Twilight are getting closer and closer to the truth, and I can't wait for the grand reveal. However, what else I can't wait for also are to thank my wonderful Patreons. Thank you, my Tier 1 Patreons: Chase Lemaster, Jason, Squall, Windfeather, Lunar Gaze, 8th Day of Night, Starlight Blaze, Hyperlink, Nightingale, Brain Flicker, Redeemer of Dark, and Dreamless Portal. My Tier 2s: Captain Blueshadow, The Animated Ghost, HKH4, aka Texture, Sword Brother and Mordred, Nocturne, DJMX 2000, Papa Lennon, and Canned Panzer. And of course a large thank you to my Titan tiers: The Dark Guardian, Maverick, Danish Dash, and Silent Titan. I appreciate your guys' support so much, and have a happy new year.